My name is Nancy, and I'm 60 years old. I built a $5 billion tech empire from nothing, working my way up from a scholarship student to CEO. I never imagined my only daughter would try to kill me for it. That night in the cabin, when my son-in-law locked the door and the flames surrounded me, I thought about all the years I'd spent building something to pass down to her. But as the smoke filled my lungs, and I heard him whisper those words through the window, I realized everything had been a lie. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe, because what they didn't know was that I had already prepared for the worst, and the proof I carried would change everything. 55 years ago, I was born in a small farmhouse outside Amarillo, Texas. My parents worked the land, barely making enough to feed 4 kids. I remember nights when dinner was just cornbread and milk, and my mother would smile and call it a feast. But she always told me that education was the way out, and she was right. When I got that full scholarship to MIT, my father cried. He'd never finished high school himself, but he drove me all the way to Massachusetts in our old pickup truck, breaking down twice on the way. I graduated in 1982 with a degree in computer science. Back then, women in tech were rare, and I faced doors slamming in my face more times than I could count. But I had something that money couldn't buy. I had hunger, real hunger, the kind that comes from knowing what it's like to have nothing. In 1985, I took $5,000 I'd saved from 3 years of working 2 jobs and started a software company in my studio apartment. The first year I ate ramen noodles for dinner and slept 4 hours a night. The second year, I landed my first major client. By year 5, we'd gone public. 30 years later, my company had revolutionized data security systems for Fortune 500 companies. We had offices in 12 countries and employed over 8,000 people. My net worth had reached $5 billion in real estate stocks and company shares. But I never forgot where I came from. I still drove a 10-year-old sedan. I still shopped at regular grocery stores. The money was never about luxury for me. It was about security, about never being hungry again, about building something that would last. My husband Robert died 5 years ago. Heart attack. Sudden. One morning he kissed me goodbye, went for his usual run, and never came home. We'd been married for 35 years. He'd been there from the beginning, supporting every risk, every late night, every hard decision. After he died, the house felt too big. The success felt hollow. But I had Jessica, my daughter, my only child. Jessica was 32 years old when this story takes place. I raised her with everything I never had. Private schools, ballet lessons, summer camps in Europe. She graduated from Yale with a degree in business, though her grades were just okay. She never wanted to work in my company, said she needed to find her own path. I respected that. She took a job at a marketing firm in Manhattan, made decent money, seemed happy enough. I was proud of her for being independent, even if she didn't have my drive. 3 years before that terrible night, Jessica brought Derek home for Thanksgiving. He was 35 tall, with perfect teeth and a firm handshake. He told me he was a financial consultant working with high-net-worth individuals. He complimented the house, asked intelligent questions about my business, and helped clear the table after dinner. I liked him immediately. He seemed stable, responsible, the kind of man who would take care of my daughter. Over the next 6 months, I saw them often. Derek would bring flowers when they visited. He'd ask about my week, remember details from previous conversations, and always insisted on helping with dishes. Jessica glowed around him. She laughed more than I'd heard her laugh in years. When Derek asked for my blessing to propose, I gave it gladly. I even helped him pick out the ring, a 3-carat diamond that cost more than my father made in his entire lifetime. Their wedding was beautiful. 200 guests at a vineyard in Napa Valley. Jessica wore my mother's pearls. Derek's family seemed nice enough middle-class people from Ohio. His father was a retired accountant, his mother a schoolteacher. Normal people, good people. Or so I thought. I gave them a house in Westchester as a wedding present and set up a trust fund that would give them a comfortable life. I wanted them to be happy. I wanted to be a good mother and mother-in-law. The first year of their marriage was wonderful. We had dinner together twice a month. They'd come over on Sundays and we'd cook together. Derek would grill steaks while Jessica and I made salads and talked about her work. I started thinking about retirement, about traveling, about finally slowing down after 40 years of constant work. I was 60 years old. I'd earned the right to rest, and I had someone to leave everything to. Someone I trusted. Someone I loved. I thought I'd done everything right. I'd built an empire. I'd raised a daughter. I'd found her a good husband. I thought my family was secure. I thought my legacy was safe. Looking back now, I can see how blind I was. How trusting, how foolish. 6 months before the cabin, small things started changing. Little things I almost didn't notice. Jessica's phone calls became less frequent. When I'd call her, she'd say she was busy, promised to call back, and then wouldn't. When we did see each other, she seemed distracted. She'd check her phone constantly during dinner, barely making eye contact. I told myself she was just busy with work, stressed about a new project. I made excuses because the alternative was too painful to consider. Then Derek started asking questions. Casual questions at first. During one dinner, he mentioned estate planning. Said his father was getting older and having trouble organizing his assets. Then he turned to me and asked if I had everything in order. I told him I had a will, of course, but I hadn't updated it in several years. He suggested I should. Said tax laws had changed. Said it would be good to have clarity. Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl, but I pushed the feeling away. A few weeks later, the questions became more direct. Derek asked how much real estate I owned, asked about the structure of my company shares, asked if I had any offshore accounts. Jessica sat there nodding along like these were perfectly normal dinner conversation topics. When I asked why he wanted to know, he smiled and said he was just trying to help me optimize my portfolio. He said with my net worth I should have a team of advisors. He offered to introduce me to some people he knew. I declined politely, but something had shifted. I started paying closer attention. I noticed the looks that passed between them when they thought I wasn't watching. I noticed how Derek's smile never quite reached his eyes anymore. I noticed how Jessica had stopped asking about my day, my health, my life. Every conversation eventually circled back to money, to assets, to inheritance. One evening, I was leaving their house after dinner and realized I'd forgotten my reading glasses. I went back inside without knocking. They were in the kitchen, and they didn't hear me come in. I heard Derek say something about patience. Jessica responded that she was tired of waiting. Derek said it wouldn't be long now, they just needed to be smart about it. I cleared my throat loudly, and they jumped apart like teenagers caught making out. They laughed it off, said they were talking about a surprise party for Jessica's friend. But I knew. Deep in my gut, I knew something was wrong. 2 weeks after that, my attorney James called me. He said someone claiming to be my representative had contacted his office asking for detailed information about my assets. A full breakdown. James, bless him, refused to give out any information and called me immediately. I asked him to describe the person. The description matched Derek perfectly. I thanked James and hung up my hands, shaking. That night I couldn't sleep. I went down to my home office and started looking through my files. Someone had been through them. Papers weren't in the right order. A file folder about property deeds was in the wrong drawer. Someone had taken my house keys and made copies to go through my things while I was out. my own daughter, my own son-in-law, in my own home. I felt sick, violated, heartbroken. But I also felt something else. Fear. Real cold fear. Because people who sneak around and ask questions about billions of dollars, people who wait impatiently for someone to die, those people are capable of anything. I started sleeping with my bedroom door locked. I started being more careful about what I ate and drank when I was at their house. I know it sounds paranoid, but the fear was real. I decided I needed space. Time to think. Time to figure out what to do. I told Jessica I was going to spend a few days at the cabin. The cabin in the mountains, 3 hours north, where Robert and I used to go to escape the city. It was isolated, peaceful, surrounded by pine forests. I planned to spend the time alone figuring out my next steps. Maybe I'd confront them. Maybe I'd cut them off. Maybe I'd change my will. I didn't know yet. When I told Jessica about my plans, something strange happened. Her eyes lit up. She immediately said she and Derek wanted to come too. Said they'd been stressed, needed a break, and it would be nice to spend quality time together. I didn't want them there. I wanted to be alone. But I couldn't think of a good reason to say no without admitting I suspected them. So I agreed, feeling trapped. The feeling of dread that settled in my stomach that day never went away. It only grew stronger. We left on a Friday afternoon. Derek drove, Jessica sat in the passenger seat, and I sat in the back. I felt like a guest in my own trip. They talked to each other the whole drive. Voices low, occasionally glancing at me in the rearview mirror. I tried to join the conversation a few times, but they'd give short answers and return to their private discussion. After a while, I stopped trying and just looked out the window, watching the city give way to suburbs, then to forests. We arrived at the cabin just as the sun was setting. The cabin was a 2-story log structure my husband had built 20 years ago. It sat in a clearing surrounded by tall pines about a mile from the nearest neighbor. No cell phone service out here, just a landline. The isolation had always felt peaceful before. That night, it felt ominous. Derek carried the bags inside, while Jessica and I started unpacking food in the kitchen. The cabin was cold, so Derek started a fire in the main fireplace. We made dinner together, pasta with vegetables. Jessica opened a bottle of wine. Everything seemed normal on the surface, but tension crackled underneath every word, every movement. I barely ate. My stomach was in knots. After dinner, I said I was tired and went upstairs to bed early. I locked my bedroom door, something I'd never done at the cabin before. I lay in bed listening to the sounds of the house. Jessica and Derek talking downstairs. The crackle of the fire. The wind in the trees outside. I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I decided to get a glass of water. I unlocked my door quietly and stepped into the hallway. That's when I heard voices from the living room below. I crept to the top of the stairs and listened. My heart was pounding so hard I thought they'd hear it. Derek's voice low but clear. "We have to do it this week. We can't wait anymore." Jessica's voice uncertain. "But what if someone figures it out?" "Nobody will know," Derek said. "We're miles from anywhere. It'll look like an accident, a fire, old cabin, old wiring. These things happen." Silence. Then Jessica again. "I don't know if I can. She's still my mother." $5 billion, Jessica." Derek's voice was hard now. $5 billion. We won't have to work another day in our lives. We can go anywhere, do anything, but only if we act now. She's already getting suspicious. We can't risk her changing the will. More silence, long silence. My whole body was shaking. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. Finally, Jessica spoke. Her voice was different. Colder, Okay, but it has to look natural. A real accident. It will, Derek said. I promise. By Sunday night, this will all be over. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. My own daughter, my own child. The baby I'd nursed, the little girl I'd held when she had nightmares, the teenager I'd helped through heartbreaks. She'd just agreed to kill me, for money, for my money. I somehow made it back to my room without making a sound. I sat on the bed, shaking, tears streaming down my face. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But I was 3 hours from the city, no cell service, and my car keys were downstairs. I was trapped in this cabin with 2 people who wanted me dead. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat against the locked door, listening for any sound of footsteps. When dawn finally came, I'd made a decision. I couldn't run, but I could prepare. In the morning, I acted normal. I came downstairs, made coffee, chatted about the weather. Jessica and Derek were friendly, cheerful even. Jessica suggested we go for a hike. Derek agreed enthusiastically. I said I was feeling a bit under the weather, maybe just wanted to rest. They seemed disappointed, but didn't push. After breakfast, I asked Derek if he'd checked the landline. I said I'd tried to make a call earlier and it wasn't working. Derek said he'd check it. I watched through the window as he went outside to where the phone line connected to the cabin. He cut it. I saw him do it. He used wire cutters from the shed and cut the phone line, then came back inside saying it must have been damaged by a fallen branch, he couldn't fix it. That's when I knew for certain. This was really happening. They were going to kill me, and they were going to do it soon. I had maybe 24 hours to live unless I did something. That afternoon, while they were outside supposedly gathering firewood, I searched the cabin frantically. I needed a weapon, a way to defend myself, but Derek had taken the car keys. The knife block in the kitchen had been emptied. Even the tools from the shed were gone. They'd planned this carefully. Then I remembered something Derek and Jessica didn't know about. When Robert built this cabin, he'd included a wine cellar, a small underground room accessed by a trapdoor in the kitchen pantry. And that wine cellar had an emergency exit, a tunnel that led 50 feet away into the woods, built in case of fire or other emergencies. Robert had been paranoid about safety. That paranoia might save my life. But I needed more than an escape route. I needed proof. Evidence of what they'd done, what they'd planned. Otherwise, even if I survived, they'd claim I was crazy paranoid suffering from dementia. They'd paint me as an unstable old woman. And $5 billion buys a lot of lawyers and a lot of believable lies. That's when I felt the small digital recorder in my coat pocket. I'd brought it to record some thoughts about my business ideas I'd been having about reorganizing the company structure. I'd forgotten I had it. I pulled it out and looked at it. It was small, about the size of a lipstick tube. With fresh batteries, it could record for 12 hours straight. I turned it on and slipped it back into my pocket. For the next 6 hours, that recorder captured everything, every conversation, every word, including the one that would save my life and destroy theirs. That night I went to bed early again, but I didn't sleep. I lay fully clothed on top of the covers, the recorder still running in my pocket, waiting. The cabin was quiet, except for the wind outside and the occasional creak of settling wood. Around 2 in the morning, I smelled it. Smoke. I got up and opened my bedroom door. The hallway was hazy. Smoke was rising from downstairs, and I could see an orange glow. Fire. They'd started the fire. My heart hammered in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. Panic would kill me faster than smoke. I went to my door and tried to open it fully. It wouldn't budge. Something was blocking it from the outside. They'd barricaded it while I was supposedly sleeping. I was trapped. The smoke was getting thicker, and I could hear the crackle of flames below. I ran to the window and looked out. In the clearing in front of the cabin, I could see 2 figures standing in the moonlight. Jessica and Derek. They were just standing there watching. watching the cabin burn, watching me die. I pounded on the window and screamed. Derek looked up. Even from the second floor, I could see his smile. He walked closer, close enough that I could hear him through the glass. "Hope you like fire, Nancy," he called up. His voice was casual, almost cheerful. I looked at Jessica. My daughter, my baby. She stood there with her arms crossed, her face illuminated by the flames starting to engulf the first floor. And she smiled, a cold, empty smile I'd never seen before. She didn't say anything. She just smiled and then turned away. "Please!" I screamed. "Jessica, please!" But they were already walking toward their car parked safely down the road. They didn't look back. The smoke was so thick now I could barely breathe. The heat was rising. I had maybe 5 minutes before the fire reached the second floor, maybe less. I grabbed the chair from the corner of the room and smashed it against the window. The glass shattered. Cold air rushed in, and for a moment I could breathe again, but I was on the second floor about 15 feet up. Below me was the covered porch roof. If I could get down to that roof, I could slide off and drop to the ground. Maybe 8 feet. Survivable if I landed right. I climbed through the window frame, cutting my hands on broken glass. I didn't feel the pain. All I felt was the desperate need to survive. I lowered myself down, hanging from the windowsill, then let go. I hit the porch roof, hard, rolled, and kept rolling until I tumbled off the edge and crashed into the bushes below. Pain exploded through my left ankle and shoulder. But I was alive. I was out. Behind me, the cabin was fully engulfed, now flames shooting through the roof. I could see them. The flames. My whole body hurt, but I forced myself to move. I crawled away from the cabin into the woods, putting distance between myself and the inferno. When I was about 100 feet into the trees, I collapsed behind a large boulder. I watched my cabin burn. The cabin Robert built. The place where we'd spent so many happy weekends. The place where I'd thought I'd die tonight. I watched it burn to the ground, and I cried. Not because of the cabin, but because my daughter had just tried to murder me. I sat there in the cold for another hour until the fire burned itself out. Then, using trees for support, I started walking. The nearest house was the ranger station about 3 miles north. I knew the way because Robert and I had hiked it dozens of times. 3 miles through dark forest with a possibly broken ankle. But I'd survived worse. I'd survived poverty. I'd survived sexism in business. I'd survived my husband's death. And I'd survived this. I walked all night, one painful step at a time. And in my pocket through it all, the recorder kept running. Kept preserving the evidence. The proof of what they'd done. Dawn was breaking when I finally saw the ranger station. It was a small log building with a green Forest Service sign out front. I stumbled up to the door and knocked, and knocked. Finally, an older man opened the door, his face creasing with concern when he saw me. "Dear God, are you all right?" he asked. His name was Tom, and he'd been a ranger for 30 years. He brought me inside, wrapped me in blankets, made me hot coffee. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely hold the cup. I told him everything. About the fire. About my daughter and son-in-law. About the murder attempt. He listened, his face growing grimmer with each word. "We need to call the police," he said. "Not yet," I said. My voice was hoarse from smoke. "First, I need to call someone else." I used Tom's phone to call James, my attorney. It was 6 in the morning, but he answered on the 3rd ring. That's the kind of lawyer he was, always available. I told him what happened. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Nancy," he finally said, his voice shaking. "Oh my God, are you safe now?" "I'm safe," I said. "But I need you to do something for me. I need you to do it right now this morning, before they find out I'm alive." "Anything," he said. I told him my plan. He didn't argue, he just said he'd handle it immediately. Then I called my executive assistant Margaret, who'd been with me for 15 years. She was shocked, horrified, but like James, she didn't waste time. She said she'd have everything ready within 2 hours. Then I asked Tom if I could wait at his station for a few more hours. I needed to see a doctor, but not yet. Not until some things were in place. Tom agreed. He brought me first aid supplies and helped me clean and bandage my cut hands. My ankle was badly swollen, probably sprained but not broken. My shoulder ached but seemed functional. I'd been lucky, incredibly lucky. While I waited, I played back some of the recording. The quality was surprisingly good. Derek's voice saying, "Hope you like fire, Nancy," came through crystal clear. The earlier conversation about planning the murder was all there too. Every word, every piece of evidence I needed. I sat in that ranger station wrapped in borrowed blankets, drinking bad coffee, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Power, control. They thought they'd won. They thought I was dead, and the $5 billion was theirs. They had no idea what was coming. Around 9 in the morning, James called back. "It's done," he said. "Every change you requested, all legal, all filed with the court. The will has been completely rewritten. Jessica gets nothing. Everything goes to the charitable foundation exactly as you specified. I've also frozen all accounts she had access to. She can't touch a penny." "Thank you, James," I said. "Nancy," he said, "I've known you for 20 years. I've seen you build an empire. But what you're doing now, this is the bravest thing I've ever witnessed. Are you sure you want to confront them yourself?" "I'm sure," I said. "I need to see their faces. I need them to know that I survived, that they failed." Margaret called next. She'd contacted the police, given them my statement and the recording. They were preparing arrest warrants, but I'd asked them to wait, to give me a few hours. The detective wasn't happy about it, but Margaret could be very persuasive when she wanted to be. Tom drove me to a small clinic in the nearest town. A doctor examined me, treated my cuts, wrapped my ankle. He wanted me to stay for observation, but I refused. I had somewhere to be. He gave me pain medication and a stern lecture about taking care of myself. I thanked him and left. Then Tom drove me to a car rental place. I rented a sedan and started the 3-hour drive back to the city. Back to my house, where Jessica and Derek would be celebrating. Celebrating my death. Counting their billions, planning their new life. I drove carefully, staying just under the speed limit. My hands were bandaged, my ankle throbbed, but I'd never felt more focused, more determined. I stopped once to buy new clothes since mine were torn and smoke-damaged. I bought a simple black pantsuit, professional, powerful. I changed in the store bathroom and threw my ruined clothes away. By the time I reached the city, it was early afternoon. Saturday afternoon. Jessica and Derek thought I'd died Friday night. They'd probably driven back this morning, maybe stopped for a celebratory breakfast somewhere. They'd be home now in my house, going through my things, making plans. I parked a block away and walked to my house. Each step hurt, but the pain kept me focused, kept me angry. I used my key to let myself in quietly. I could hear voices from the living room. Laughter, music playing softly. I walked through the foyer and stood in the doorway to the living room. And I waited for them to notice me. They had champagne. That's the first thing I saw. An expensive bottle of champagne that I recognized from my wine collection open on the coffee table. Jessica was sprawled on my white sofa shoes, off looking relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in months. Derek was at my desk, papers spread out in front of him, a laptop open, planning, scheming, dividing up their fortune. "We should go to Monaco first," Jessica was saying. "I've always wanted to stay at the Hôtel de Paris. We can spend a month there, then maybe buy a villa in the south of France." "Whatever you want, baby," Derek said. "We can buy 10 villas if you want. 20, The world is ours now. I can't believe how easy it was, Jessica said, and then she laughed. Actually laughed. I thought I'd feel guilty, but I don't. Is that terrible? Not terrible, Derek said. Practical. She was old. She wasn't going to live forever anyway. We just moved up the timeline a bit. That's when I reached over and flipped on the overhead lights. Bright, harsh lights that flooded the room. They both jumped. Derek actually knocked over his champagne glass. And then they saw me. Jessica screamed. An actual scream, high-pitched and terrified. She scrambled backward on the sofa, her face white as paper. Derek just stared, his mouth hanging open, frozen in place. Surprise, I said. My voice was calm, steady. I'm not dead. That's not possible, Derek whispered. You were in the cabin. We saw the fire. You saw a fire, I said. You didn't stay to watch me burn, though, did you? You left too soon. Jessica found her voice. Mom, oh my God, Mom, we thought you were dead. There was a fire, the cabin caught fire. We tried to save you, but we couldn't get back inside. I held up my hand. Stop, just stop. I heard you. That first night. I heard every word of your plan. And this. I pulled the small recorder from my pocket. This recorded everything, including Derek telling me he hoped I liked fire. The color drained from Derek's face. He took a step back. That's not you, can't we never? Hope you like fire, Nancy, I said, repeating his exact words. That's what you said, while my cabin burned with me inside. While my daughter stood next to you and smiled. Jessica started to cry. I didn't want to. It was all Derek. He made me. He said if I didn't help him, he'd leave me. Shut up, Jessica, Derek snarled. The mask was completely off now, his handsome face twisted into something ugly. You wanted this as much as I did. You've been complaining about waiting for your inheritance for 2 years. That's not true, Jessica sobbed. It is true, I said quietly. I heard you agree to it, Jessica. Nobody forced you. You chose money over your mother's life. You chose to let me burn to death. Derek suddenly moved, lunging toward the front door, but he didn't make it 2 steps before it opened, and 3 police officers walked in. Detective Martinez in front, 2 uniformed officers behind her. Derek Peterson. Jessica Peterson, you're under arrest for attempted murder, Detective Martinez said. Derek tried to run past them. One of the officers grabbed him, spun him around, and had him in handcuffs within seconds. Derek started yelling, cursing, thrashing. It took both officers to hold him. Jessica just sat on the sofa sobbing. When the female officer approached with handcuffs, Jessica looked at me, really looked at me. Mom, she whispered. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please don't let them take me. Please. I looked at my daughter, the little girl I'd raised, the child I'd loved more than anything in the world, and I felt nothing but a vast, empty sadness. You tried to kill me, Jessica, I said. You locked me in a burning building. You smiled while I screamed for help. You're not my daughter anymore. I don't know who you are, but you're not my child. The officer led her away, still crying, still begging. Derek was still fighting, still shouting threats. They took them both out to separate patrol cars. The neighbors were starting to come out, watching the spectacle. By tomorrow, it would be all over the news. Detective Martinez stayed behind for a few minutes. I gave her the recorder. She listened to a few seconds of it, her jaw tightening. This is solid evidence, Ms. Nancy. Combined with the arson investigation at the cabin and your testimony, we have a strong case. They'll go to prison for a long time. Good, I said simply. After everyone left, I sat down on my sofa. The same sofa where Jessica had been lounging minutes before, planning her new life with my money. The house was quiet again, empty. I was alone, truly alone. My husband was dead. My daughter was a stranger in handcuffs. I had no family left, but I was alive. Against all odds, I'd survived. The trial took 3 months to begin. The media had a field day. Tech billionaire's daughter tries to murder mother for inheritance. The story was everywhere. My company's stock dipped briefly, then recovered when I made a statement, reassuring investors that I was healthy and still in charge. Jessica's lawyers tried to paint her as a victim. They claimed Derek had manipulated her, abused her, coerced her into participating. But the recording told a different story. My voice asking Jessica to help me. Derek's voice cold and calculating. And Jessica's voice agreeing. Choosing. Deciding that $5 billion was worth more than her mother's life. Derek's defense was even weaker. He tried to claim the recording was fake doctored, that I'd staged the whole thing for publicity. But forensic analysis proved the recording was genuine. The arson investigators confirmed the cabin fire had been deliberately set with accelerant. The phone line had been cut. The timeline matched my testimony perfectly. I attended every day of the trial. I sat in the front row and watched. People asked me why. Why put myself through that? Why not just let the lawyers handle it and stay away? But I needed to be there. I needed to see this through to the end. Jessica cried often during the trial. She'd look at me with pleading eyes, mouthing, "I'm sorry," over and over. But I never responded. I just sat there, expressionless, waiting for justice. Derek never looked at me. He stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, radiating anger. The prosecution presented the recording. The courtroom was silent as my voice filled the air begging for help while Derek told me to enjoy the fire. Several jurors were crying by the end of it. Jessica put her head down on the table. Derek still didn't react. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts: attempted murder, arson, conspiracy. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, they'd remain in custody. No bail. Too much of a flight risk. At sentencing, the judge asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement. I stood up and walked to the front of the courtroom. I looked at Jessica and Derek. Jessica was crying again. Derek's face was stone. "I built everything I have from nothing," I said. "I worked 60-hour weeks for 30 years. I sacrificed my health, my time, my youth to build something meaningful, something lasting. I did it so my daughter would never know poverty like I did, never know hunger, never know fear, and she tried to kill me for it." Jessica sobbed louder. "Mom, please." I ignored her. The money meant nothing to me compared to having a family. If Jessica had simply asked me for money, I would have given it to her. If she'd told me she was struggling, I would have helped. But she didn't want help. She wanted everything, and she wanted it now. She couldn't wait for me to die naturally. She had to try to murder me. I turned to the judge. "I don't want mercy for them. I want justice. I want them to serve every single day of whatever sentence you see fit. They tried to take my life. They deserve to lose their freedom." The judge nodded. Then she delivered the sentences. Derek got 25 years. Jessica got 18 years. They'd both be old when they got out. Middle-aged, at least. Their youth would be spent in prison cells, just as they'd tried to ensure mine was spent in a grave. As the bailiffs led them away, Derek finally looked at me. His eyes were full of hate, pure, undiluted hate. But I didn't care. He couldn't hurt me anymore. Jessica looked at me too. Her eyes weren't hateful. They were lost, empty, like she'd finally realized what she'd done, what she'd become, what she'd lost. But it was too late, years too late. I walked out of that courtroom and went home to my empty house. And for the first time in months, I slept through the entire night. The months after the trial were hard, harder than I expected. People kept asking me how I felt, if I'd forgiven them, if I would visit Jessica in prison. The answer was always the same. No, I hadn't forgiven them. I wouldn't visit. What they'd done was unforgivable. Not because they'd tried to kill me, though, that was horrible enough, but because they'd been willing to kill me. The mother who'd loved Jessica her whole life, the person who'd given her everything, they'd been willing to watch me burn alive for money. I saw a therapist, Dr. Richardson, a kind woman in her 50s who specialized in trauma and family betrayal. She helped me understand that what I was feeling was normal. The grief, the anger, the sense of violation. She said it was like mourning a death because, in a way, I had lost my daughter. The daughter I thought I had never existed. The real Jessica was someone I'd never truly known. I threw myself back into work for a while, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. I'd built my company to leave a legacy, to pass something down, but I had no one to pass it to. So I started making changes. I promoted talented young executives, many of them women who reminded me of my younger self. Hungry, driven, brilliant. I mentored them, taught them what I'd learned, prepared them to take over. 6 months after the trial, I stepped down as CEO. I appointed a successor, a 40-year-old woman named Lauren, who'd been with the company for 12 years. She was perfect, smart, ethical, innovative. The company would be in good hands. I remained on the board, but I was finally truly retired, and I started figuring out what to do with $5 billion. I'd already changed my will during the crisis. Everything would go to charity when I died. But why wait until I was dead? I set up foundations. Scholarships for poor kids who wanted to study science and technology. Programs to help women start businesses. Grants for single mothers going back to school. I funded research into diseases that affected poor communities. I built community centers in neighborhoods that looked like the one I grew up in. Giving away money turned out to be harder than making it. You have to be careful, make sure it's going to the right places, doing actual good. But it was also more rewarding than anything I'd done in business. Every scholarship recipient who wrote to thank me, every small business that succeeded with our help, every kid who got a good education because of our programs, those things mattered more than any profit margin ever had. I started traveling too. Places I'd always wanted to see, but never had time for. I went to Italy and learned to paint in Tuscany. I hiked in New Zealand. I spent a month in Thailand, learning to meditate at a Buddhist monastery. I wasn't trying to find myself or anything cliché like that. I was just finally living. Actually living, instead of constantly working. People ask me if I'm lonely. Sometimes I am. I won't lie about that. The house is too big for one person. Some mornings I wake up and forget just for a second that Jessica won't be calling, that I don't have a daughter anymore. Those moments hurt, but they pass. And then I get up and I do something meaningful with my day. I don't let the loneliness consume me. I've made new friends, real friends. People who like me for me, not for my money. People who don't know or care that I'm a billionaire. I volunteer at a women's shelter on Tuesdays. I go to a book club on Thursdays. I have coffee with Tom the forest ranger, who saved me every few months. He's become a good friend. We laugh about how we met, though it's still painful sometimes. I think about forgiveness sometimes. Dr. Richardson says I don't owe anyone forgiveness. That forgiveness is something you give yourself, not something you owe to the people who hurt you. I don't know if I'll ever forgive Jessica and Derek. Maybe someday, maybe not. But I've let go of the anger. I don't think about them constantly anymore. I don't fantasize about revenge. I've moved on. I'm free. That's what money couldn't buy, and what they'll never understand. Freedom isn't having $5 billion. Freedom is not needing it. Not letting it define you. Not letting the pursuit of it destroy your soul. They thought the money would make them free. Instead, their greed made them prisoners long before they ever saw the inside of a cell. I learned something important through all of this. I learned that you can't buy safety. You can't buy family. You can't buy love or loyalty. All you can do is live your life with integrity and hope for the best. Sometimes people will disappoint you. Sometimes they'll betray you in ways you never imagined possible. But you survive. You keep going. You find new meaning. I'm 61 now. I've got maybe 20 or 30 good years left if I'm lucky. And I'm going to spend every single one of them doing something that matters. Not building companies, not accumulating wealth, but making a difference, being kind, helping people who actually need help, living authentically. That's my revenge, I suppose. Living well, being happy, not letting what they did destroy me. Sometimes late at night I think about that moment in the cabin. The smoke, the flames, the absolute terror. Derek's voice telling me to enjoy the fire, Jessica's cold smile. I could have died that night. I should have died. But I didn't. I survived. And that survival, that choice to keep fighting, to keep living, that's the real victory. Not the prison sentences, not the changed will, but the simple fact that I'm still here, still standing, still moving forward. They wanted my death to be their beginning. Instead, my survival became mine. Sometimes surviving is the best revenge there is. And I've survived. I'm still here. And I'm finally truly free. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had someone you trusted completely betray you? How did you handle it? Drop a comment below and share your story. And if this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more. Share this with someone who needs to hear that survival is possible, that betrayal doesn't have to break you. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope you find peace in your own journey, whatever battles you're facing. Remember, you're stronger than you think. Take care of yourselves out there.